Okay, we are here today to talk about our Science of Reading journey, so let's begin. We have Dr. Lori Severino, and she will introduce herself and tell us who you are, where you work, and the scope of your position.
Thanks for having me, Donna. Happy to be here. I'm at Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Education in Special Education. And my duties at Drexel are to do research, which I usually do around teacher preparation or dyslexia. And so those two fit nicely together. And then I teach in most of our literacy courses. So we have the Wilson Reading System in our coursework. So I'm a Wilson certified trainer, so I teach those courses. We also have a course that all undergraduates and graduates in teacher education need to take in teaching struggling readers. And so I often teach that course. And then we have an early literacy course that I teach, basically for kindergarten and first grade teachers.
You sound like a busy lady, and your work is so appreciated. So tell us about your educational background. When were you first introduced to evidence-based instruction for the science of reading?
Great question. So I have a similar journey to other people. I got my degree back in the 80s, and I got my first teaching job in special education. I was a learning support teacher in Pennsylvania, and I did that for 10 years. And then I had kids, so I stayed home for a couple years and then went back to teaching. And in my second position at a new school, we had moved closer to the Philadelphia area, and I was teaching 10th grade English in a learning support capacity. And probably around 1999, I was frustrated that my students I wasn't able to help them read. And so they were secondary students. Everybody assumed that there was nothing you could do by the time they got to high school. And so it was very frustrating that I could read to them and they could understand. The vocabulary was great. But then when it came down to them reading or reading silently, they couldn't do it, right? So I was very frustrated. I went to a Wilson 3-day workshop that year, and I came back, the light bulb went off, and I said, this is exactly, and it was meant for older struggling readers. So I actually convinced my school district to let me be trained in level 1. And I worked with my practicum student. He was on a pre-primer level when I started with him. I ended up working with him for 4 years straight, all year round, no stops, even in the summer. And he graduated on an 11th grade reading level.
Oh,
so, I mean, there was no going back after that because I knew what was working and I knew was helping my other students also. I suggested to the district that even though it was the high school level, we needed to give these kids a chance and teach them how to read, even though everybody said it was just much too late. And I actually said to my supervisor that if they didn't bring this in and let me teach it during the school day, that I would find another job. And so they did, and it was phenomenal. I had small groups of kids all day long coming in doing Wilson, saw great results, and I got to be a trainer and then trained other teachers in the district to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that when I left, it's still going. I left there in 2008 and they have still been teaching it at the high school level. So, and they've been doing Wilson and the middle school and foundations at the early grades. So it was really, really important. So then when I got my doctorate, I decided that I probably wanted to move into higher ed so that I could change what was happening there and train the teachers and give them the information they need before they leave their program so that they could do the same thing in their schools.
So it sounds like the knowledge you gained through your practice has influenced your instruction as a professor.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you see how many kids you can affect with how you're teaching them, and you see their self-concept change, they become much more confident. How do you not provide that to as many kids that need it, right? So that has been my goal, is to get to more kids.
Absolutely. So in your opinion, what is needed in teacher education preparation to assure that teachers are prepared to be effective reading instructors or teachers?
So first and foremost, they really need that deep knowledge of how the brain learns to read, how the process works, and to be able to assess the K-12 students to find out what is their issue. Why is it that they can't read? And when it's a decoding issue, what's the issue there? Is it a phonemic awareness issue? It's usually the phonics and learning those skills also. And so they need that deep knowledge, but not just the knowledge. They need to practice it with somebody there to help them. Am I doing this right? What else could I be doing? Because you might have all the knowledge, but until you start working with children and seeing the nuances, and every child is different, you know, they get stuck and they're not really, well, why isn't this working? But somebody that has experience giving them feedback really helps. We see that all the time in our practicum. When they get immediate feedback, it just helps them, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't know about that as deeply as I should, so now let me go back and try again.
Mm-hmm.
So that practicum and the knowledge base is so, so important. On top of that, I also think that there needs to be, in the faculty, there needs to be that deep knowledge so that you can pass that on to your candidates in the program. If we could get that deep knowledge and that practicum experience in every undergraduate program, you would see a big change in the schools. Mm-hmm. And I think that will happen if enough school districts, which we're seeing the big shift, right? In school districts are realizing the science of reading and what that encompasses really is what's needed in the schools. Mm-hmm. And so when you start having more districts looking for teachers that already have that knowledge, it's going to have an impact on higher ed, as well as coming from the standards from each state should be including all that, the knowledge that's necessary. And the practicum piece is really important for our candidates. Mm-hmm. They need to be in a good placement where the teacher that they're working with when they're doing their student teaching also understands the science of reading, right? So it's a very delicate, and sometimes that's hard to do when you're trying to place students. In Drexel, we place them all over the world, right? So sometimes that's hard to do.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what our Facebook page is all about, Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College. We know that we need teachers better prepared, and we know that we have, with better instruction and better practicum, I think you hit the nail on the head, we do need that practicum piece. So that's what we're hoping schools will start doing a better job of, including that, and that practice piece of the science. Because if you don't know it and you don't know what to do, you can't be an effective teacher. Lori,
right. I mean, it's so true. I mean, when you look at, you know, where I came from, it's very similar to what other people have gone through, right? And so if I had had all that knowledge when I first came out, what a difference I would have made in the first 10 years I was teaching.
My story is very parallel to yours, minus the PhD. But yes, I had the same experience. I didn't have the expertise, and once I had it, there was no going back.
Right.
So Laura, I want to thank you for being with us today. And I want to remind everyone, whether dyslexia or not, the science of reading matters a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.